Hi guys! Welcome to my channel. Welcome to Reflection in Minutes. If you're new to this channel, please do not forget to click subscribe and the bell icon below so that you'll be notified whenever new videos will be uploaded. Lakas maka-vlogger, no? Anyway, for today's di pala to vlog, ano pala to, screencast of our lesson for today, and that is about the non-specific defense of mechanisms. Okay? So sit back, relax, and try to enjoy microbiology. Okay? So anyway, our discussion shall be divided into the following. We will be discussing the non-specific host defense mechanisms. Basically, there are two types of immunity. We have the specific and non-specific. So, non-specific defense is also known as the natural immunity. Natural immunity because it is something that it is something that is innate to you. So that is the reason why it's called natural immunity. Okay, let's talk about the host defense mechanisms. Host defense mechanism is important because as a human being, of course, we have to protect our body from pathogens. So when we say pathogens of course refers to microorganisms that are harmful and are capable of causing diseases. Okay. Since there are actually three lines of defense, let me emphasize to you that the first two lines of defenses are also known as the non-specific immunity. Because under the third line of defense, the immune response is very specific, which means that it is the specific immunity. Okay? So, why specific? Because in the third line of defense, there is what you call these special proteins called antibodies. And these are produced in response with antigenic stimulation or in response to the presence of antigen. So, antigen is actually short for antibody generator. So when we say specific, let's say for example, you produce antibodies against hepatitis B virus. So the antibodies that you produce against hepatitis B virus would only work against hepatitis B, not against coronavirus, not against hepatitis A. So that's how specific it is. Okay? Anyway, that shall be discussed by other professor. And for this particular chapter, we shall be discussing the non-specific defense of the host. So, moving forward, this is like the first line of defense. So, what would be the first line of defense? If this would be the microbes, our first line of defense would include the intact skin, intact mucous membrane. So that would be the first line of defense. In fact, even the tears that would come out of your eyes, that would also be the first line of defense. The acidity of the gastric juice, so whenever you swallow with microorganisms will not be able to survive the acidity of the gastric juice. And even for female, the presence for female, there are also lactic acid producing bacteria called Lactobacillus acidophilus that may be antagonistic for the growth of harmful microorganisms. So although that is considered as establishment of ecological niche, but somehow the presence of acidity in the vagina prevents harmful organisms from growing. So that could also be a non-specific defense. Or for example, your sweat, okay? And then whenever you become oily, so in fact the sebaceous gland is producing sebum, and sebum would also have antibacterial properties. So there are many first line of defense, okay, defenses, okay, within the non-specific immunity. And then the second line of defense would include responses, okay, whenever the organisms have entered the body. Okay, so this would be inflammation and phagocytosis. And the third line of defense is now where the soldiers of the immune system will work. So the response, as what I've told you, is very particular or very specific to certain pathogen. Okay, so again, the non-specific host defense mechanisms would involve the first line of defense and the second line of defense, while the specific host defense mechanism is considered as the third line of defense. Okay, so let's talk about first the non-specific host defense mechanisms. These are general and serve to protect the body against many harmful substances. It is something that is innate or inborn within you, so which means that this particular defense will protect you regardless of what microorganisms we are actually pertaining to. So, for example, microorganisms, all of these microorganisms, whether will not be able to survive the acidity of the gastric juice. So, for example, Staphylococcus aureus. But you might be wondering, how come if these organisms are not able to survive the acidity of the gastric juice, how come that there are still cases of gastroenteritis? The answer is, so sinagot ko yung sarilong tanong, no? So the answer is, whenever these pathogens enter our body, they enter by means of vehicle. So in the parlance of food poisoning, when we say vehicle, this refers to food and water. Okay? So again, non-specific immunity is also known as innate or inborn resistance. So exact factors that produce innate resistance are not well understood. So there are many factors. Some say it's genetic. Some say it has something to do with race. And some say that it has something to do with nutritional state of a certain individual. So there are many factors. Okay. So other non-specific host defense mechanisms include mechanical and physical barriers to invasion, chemical factors, microbial antagonism, the Lactobacillus acidophilus in the vagina, the one that I've used as example a while ago, fever, inflammatory response, and phagocytic WBC. Okay. So let's talk about the skin and mucous membrane as physical barrier. Our skin, for as long as our skin is intact, we are protecting ourselves, the entire body, against microorganisms. That is the reason why for burn patients, they are actually at risk of getting infection. Do you know that the leading cause of infection among burn patients, number one is Staphylococcus aureus, and then followed by Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Okay, so our skin is very important. Its pH is very important. Okay, so majority of the microorganisms will not be able to survive the acidity. Okay, the temperature of the skin whenever we perspire, and then the cilia. Cilia, particularly the one that is found at the trachea. If you remember histology, in the trachea we have the pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And then this cilia, okay, the cilia there is capable of propelling away microorganisms. And then there are also various enzymes, lysozyme, the one that can be found in our tears. Okay, these are the components of the first line of body defense. Microbial antagonism happens when indigenous microbiota prevents colonization of new arrivals as a result of competition for sites and nutrients, which meaning to say, if a certain microorganisms are considered to be as the residents of that in that particular organ, so we consider them as indigenous microbiota. So they become hostile to those microorganisms that will just arrive. So for example, again, Lactobacillus acidophilus. So they are the residents in the vagina. So the mere presence of Lactobacillus acidophilus in the vagina will somehow prevent harmful microorganisms from causing urinary tract infection. Example, it may somehow prevent Candida albicans, or it may somehow prevent Escherichia coli. Okay, so that's what you call microbial antagonism. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the second line of defense. There are several chemical factors that may contribute in the second line of defense. So one of them is the level of transferrin. Okay, so this transferrin is an example of glycoprotein. So when we say glycoprotein, it is a combination of carbohydrates and protein. So whenever that level of transferrin increases, and it usually increases in response to systemic bacterial infection. Okay, so when we say systemic bacterial infection, most of the time this refers to sepsis, meaning bacteria have massively infected the entire body system because of sepsis. So transferrin will bind to iron, depriving pathogens of these vital nutrients. Okay, so transferrin will remove the iron, so that iron will not be available for microorganisms. Okay, so that's transferrin. Fever. Fever is actually stimulated by pyrogenic substances. So when you say pyrogenic, these are fever-producing substances, and most of them actually come whenever we have pathogens. Okay, and of course, fever is also stimulated by cytokines. So cytokines are actually produced by cells. An example of cytokines is interleukin-1. So why is fever important? Fever will augment host defenses by stimulating leukocytes, reducing available free plasma iron, and inducing the production of interleukin-1. So fever is both an indicator that you have an infection, and at the same time is also useful to boost your immune system. Okay, so that's the importance of fever. And then we also have another important substance as part of the second line of defense, and this would be the interferons. So the key word in remembering interferons is that interferons are antiviral substances, or in particular, these are antiviral proteins. And who produces interferons? So the thing is, whenever the cell, so let's say that there are two adjacent cells. So if this cell, for example, is infected with a virus, okay, so this cell will eventually die. Okay, but in doing so, it will produce interferon, and the interferon will be passed to another cell, so that this cell will be protected against that virus that had caused the death of the previous cell that produced the interferon. Okay, so that's the beauty of interferon. So the cell that was infected was able to produce antiviral proteins, so that viruses will not be able to multiply anymore. So there are actually three types of interferons. So we have the alpha, beta, and the gamma, and they are produced by three different types of cells. Okay, these three types are induced by different stimuli. So most of the time, they are being stimulated by viruses. But there are other possible stimuli, and this would include tumors or the presence of cancer, certain species of bacteria, and even foreign cells. So interferons are not virus specific. Okay, so they are not virus specific, but they are species specific. Meaning, human interferons obviously would work with humans. Okay, so interferons can cause non-specific flu-like symptoms. Okay, so interferons are able to cause a non-specific flu-like symptoms. Okay, now complement. The term complement is actually short for to complete. Okay, so complement means to complete. And what are we completing? We are completing in the series of reaction. We are completing one of the most important natural defense mechanism, and that is the ability of the immune system to cause cytolysis of pathogens, and most of these pathogens are bacteria. Okay, so take note that complement has the end product or end goal in mind. Okay, and the end goal in mind of complement is cytolysis. So when you say cytolysis, destruction of cell. And what are we destroying? We may possibly destroy RBC, but for the purpose of body defense, the ultimate goal of cytolysis is to destroy bacterial cell. Okay, so complement is a group of 30 different proteins found in normal blood plasma, and they are complementary to the immune system, which means that complement work hand in hand with immune system. And without immune system, complement will not be able to work, because complement proteins are supposed to bind with two types of antibodies, and these are the IgG and IgM. So we'll learn more about these immunoglobulins in the next chapter. So complement components interact with each other in a stepwise manner, like a domino effect, meaning you cannot go with the step 3, 4 without first completing steps 1 and 2. So we call it complement cascade. So complement system assists in the destruction of many different pathogens. So we call it, again, cytolysis or cytotoxic reactions to bacterial cell, for example. Okay. Another important component of complement is opsonization. What is opsonization? Opsonization is the process, okay, but the protein that is involved in opsonization, we call it opsonin. Okay, the protein is opsonin, but the process in which you deposit opsonin, okay, to facilitate phagocytosis, you call that opsonization. Okay, how does it happen? If there is a bacteria, okay, let me go. So let's say, for example, this is the bacterial cell. So opsonins are actually deposited at the surface of the bacterial cells. Opsonin are actually, this is the opsonin. Opsonin are actually antibodies. Okay? So they are deposited at the surface of the bacterial cell. And what's the purpose of opsonin? So that they can easily be seen by this WBC called by these WBCs that are capable of phagocytosis. Therefore, opsonization is a process that will facilitate phagocytosis. Okay, so moving forward, whenever we get infected, we produce acute phase proteins. And one of the most popular acute phase protein is called the CRP, or the C-reactive protein. Okay? So CRPs, or the C-reactive protein, is an example of acute phase protein. And this particular type of proteins will increase significantly whenever we are infected, inflamed, or whenever tissue injury has occurred. Okay? So if you are, for example, you'll be in the hospital and there is a lab request called CRP. CRP refers to C-reactive protein. And the reason why doctors are requesting for CRP because the doctor wants to know the extent of inflammation. So let's say, for example, the person is suspected to have appendicitis. So let's say, for example, doctors would be requesting for CRP to determine the extent of inflammation. And after appendectomy, the doctor would be requesting again for another set of CRP to determine whether somehow the inflammation has subsided. But then again, you have to remember that the CRP that we are referring to assess inflammation is nonspecific. It will tell you, yes, there is an inflammation, but it won't tell you what have actually caused the inflammation. Okay. Okay, so there is even, in fact, a high precision CRP to determine the level of or to determine the potential prognosis of myocardial infarction. Okay, so cytokines. So let's talk about cytokines. Cytokines are produced by a cell. So cyto refers to the cell, and kines refers to the chemokines. That's a specific protein derivative. Okay, and chemokines are chemoattractants, meaning they can recruit phagocytes to sites where they are needed. Okay, so cytokines therefore are chemical mediators released from many different types of cells in the body. Most of these cells are, by the way, lymphocytes. Okay, they enable two cells to communicate with each other within the immune system and between the immune system and other systems of the body. Okay, so cytokines, an example of cytokines, for example, is interleukin-1, and interleukin-1 is the one that allows the hypothalamus to raise the temperature whenever there's an infection. Okay, and that is an example of that is the reason why we have fever whenever we get infected. Okay, so let's talk about inflammation. The body responds to any local injury, irritation, microbial invasion, bacterial toxin, or by a complex series of events is called inflammation. So, inflammation, there are three major events in acute inflammations, okay? But why inflammation is important? Inflammation is important because of the following reason. Number one, inflammation is important so that the infection will be localized. Okay, so it will be confined to a certain place, and if that happens, it is much easier for our immune system to clear the infection. And number two, inflammation is important for tissue repair. Okay, so it is important for tissue repair. Okay, so there are actually three steps in inflammation. Number one is vasodilation. When you say vaso refers to blood vessel. Okay, dilation means that the diameter increases. So the diameter of the blood vessel increases, particularly that of the capillaries. So if the diameter of capillaries increases, this will allow blood to flow to the site of the injury. So that's the reason why there's a possible swelling of the injured area because of vasodilation. And because of the vasodilation, there would be increased permeability of capillaries. So this will allow the escape of plasma and plasma proteins. Remember the acute phase proteins? Okay, and some of the proteins here are also mediators of inflammation, such as prostaglandin. Okay, and then because of that event, there would many leukocytes will actually go to the site of injury. They will accumulate at the site of injury, particularly neutrophils or segmenters. You know why? Neutrophils or segmenters are capable of diapedesis. So when you say diapedesis, they have this ability because blood vessels are made up of endothelium, a simple squamous epithelium, and it's flat, and in between the cells, WBCs such as neutrophils or segmenters are able to squeeze themselves out of the capillaries, from the tissues to the capillaries, or sorry, from the capillaries to the tissue, to the site of the injury. So that's what the process wherein they exit out of the endothelial lining of the blood vessel, we call that diapedesis. So that is the reason why whenever there's an infection, you would see pus, or in Tagalog we call it nana. Okay, and it's because WBCs actually go there, neutrophils go there, and the reason why they went there is so that the infection will be localized, so it will not spread anymore. So the presence of pus, the presence of nana is an indicator of active bacterial infection. Okay, so ito, the primary purpose of inflammation, number one, I think I did tell you this a while ago, to localize the infection so that it will prevent the spread of microbial invaders. Number 2, it will neutralize any toxin being produced at the site. And most importantly, for tissue repair, for wound healing. Okay? But there are 4 major signs of inflammation: redness, okay, heat, swelling, and pain. You have to undergo this process in order for you to heal. You need to feel the pain so that you will heal. Nox, ganon, ha? In order for you to heal, or in order for you to have tissue repair, you need to undergo this process. And one of the processes is pain. Okay? Because during inflammation, there are also chemical mediators of inflammation, such as prostaglandin. Okay? Plasma that escapes from capillaries into the site causes the area to become edematous. So that's the reason why it's swollen. It is swollen. Remember, because of the vasodilation. Okay, so in a nutshell, this image here will summarize the purposes of inflammation, from localization of infection to tissue repair. Okay, so the sequences includes tissue injury, vasodilation, increased permeability, emigration of leukocytes, we call it the diapidesis. Chemotaxis means that the leukocytes are chemically attracted, okay, to the site of injury. Why? Because there are many pathogens at the site of the injury, and these leukocytes are actually attracted to TLR. TLR, we call it the toll-like receptors. Okay, and of course, in order for leukocytes to prevent inflammation, to prevent the infection to spread, these leukocytes, these neutrophils, need to phagocytize the pathogens. Okay, so that's why there is what you call phagocytosis. So, okay, so as you can see, during tissue injury, an inflammatory response may be triggered by physical, chemical, or biological agents. So, for example, there's a wooden splinter that has punctured your skin. So, first, bacteria will enter. So, there would be what? Vasodilation, increased blood flow. And because of this, there would be increased permeability because the protein-rich exudate containing immunoglobulins and complement move to the site of injury. Exudate is a fluid as a result of inflammatory process. And then fourth step is emigration of leukocytes. As you can see, leukocytes can actually squeeze themselves out of the endothelial lining of the blood vessel. So we call it diapidesis. And the number 5, chemotaxis, meaning the leukocytes are attracted to the pathogens such as to its toll-like receptors. And then number 6, finally, there is a phagocytosis. Okay, so bacteria are actually engulfed by means of endocytosis, and they are eventually degraded. Okay, so inflammation, therefore, in inflammation, there is an accumulation of fluid or cells and cellular debris at the inflammation site. So we call it inflammatory exudate. So remember, a fluid that is produced as a result of inflammatory process, we call it exudate. So if the exudate is thick, greenish yellow, such as abscess, okay, we call it purulent exudate or pus. NANA. In many inflammatory responses, such as arthritis or pancreatitis, you'll not be able to see any exudate, probably because there's no invading microorganisms. However, if there are pathogenic microbes, so when we say pathogenic microbes, this refers to microorganisms that are capable of producing pus, such as the Staphylococcus streptococci, you would expect that there would be additional pus formation. Okay, so not all inflammatory response will result to exudate. particularly if there are no invading microorganisms. So, after inflammation, phagocytosis will take place. So, WBCs that are capable of phagocytosis, we call them phagocytes. Okay? The process in which they surround and eventually ingest or engulf the foreign material, we call it phagocytosis. And there are three major categories of leukocytes that are capable. There are three major categories of leukocytes. Okay, monocytes, lymphocytes, and granulocytes. Okay, granulocytes, they have granules in the cytoplasm, and there are three types of granulocytes. Okay, eosinophil, basophils, and neutrophils. So the most important cells that are capable of phagocytosis are macrophages and neutrophils. Macrophages are actually differentiated monocytes, meaning when they mature, they may be classified as macrophages, particularly if they are found in the tissues. Incidentally, macrophages are also known as antigen-presenting cells. Okay, so macrophages are also known as antigen-presenting cells. Okay, so these are the cellular elements of human blood. So, neutrophils increases in bacterial infection. Eosinophil increases in parasitic infection. So, whenever there is allergic reaction, hypersensitivity reaction, particularly type 1 hypersensitivity reaction, basophil may increase. Okay. So, lymphocytes, we will talk more about the lymphocytes in specific immunity. So, opsonization, remember opsonization? Opsonization, during the process of complement cascade, they may produce opsonins that may surround bacterial cells. This will make phagocytosis much better, much easier for the phagocytes. Bacterial cells are surrounded by capsule, a slimy polysaccharide layer called capsule, phagocytosis will be much difficult. So there are several examples of bacteria that are encapsulated, so such as Klebsiella pneumoniae and Streptococcus pneumoniae. Okay, so these are the 4 steps in phagocytosis. So first is chemotaxis. So chemotaxis, chemical attractions. Okay, so phagocytes are attracted by chemotactic agents to the sites where they are needed. So most of these chemicals are TLRs, or the toll-like receptors. Number 2 is attachment. Okay, attachment is when the phagocyte attaches to an object. Okay, and then ingestion. Ingestion is when the pseudopodia surround the cells and it is taken into the cell. So that process is also known as endocytosis. And then digestion. The process is broken down and dissolved by digestive enzymes because remember, we have lysosome as part of the organelle within our cell or within the phagocyte cells, and this lysosome produces lysozyme, which is an acid hydrolase, and this one is capable of degranulating bacterial cells that were ingested by the phagocyte. Okay, so they will be dissolved by this particular mechanism. So, in summary, the 4 steps. So, if the vacuole is found inside the cytoplasm, we call it phagosome. So, there is a, let's say for example, this is the lysosome. If the lysosome eventually produces lysozyme to degranulate the bacterial cell, so we call it the phagolysosome. So eventually, the bacterial cell will be dissolved. What will happen to the WBC that have ingested bacteria? WBCs that have ingested bacteria. Eventually, there will be a vacuole within the cytoplasm of the WBC, and that would be the end of his journey. His dipalatis. That would be the end of its journey. Okay, eventually, WBC will also die, but they die defending themselves. knocks. Okay? So, yan. This is now the dissolve. The phagolysosome, drinawin ko pa, meron pala rito. So, the lysosome then comes into contact with the phagosome. So, now have the phagolysosome and then eventual digestion. Okay, so this is an example, actual example of WBCs that have vacuoles. These WBCs are able to engulf Giardia lamblia. This one, Giardia is, larger than bacteria, and yet these WBCs are able to engulf Giardia lamblia. And you can actually see the very large vacuole in the cytoplasm. And this is the actual electron micrograph of when WBCs have ingested Giardia lamblia. Bacterial cells are much smaller than Giardia lamblia, but these WBCs, badass, they're able to engulf Giardia lamblia. Okay? So, mechanisms by which pathogens escape destruction. Number one is capsule. Capsule, slimy polysaccharide layer that prevents phagocytosis from happening. Examples are Streptococcus pneumoniae, Klebsiella pneumoniae, they have capsule. Haemophilus influenzae has also a capsule. Some bacteria are able to produce leucocidin. Leucocidin can kill phagocytes. Some bacteria, such as Mycobacterium tuberculosis, the one that can cause TB, are not destroyed within the phagolysosome. That's why the alveolar macrophages, inside the alveolar macrophages, Mycobacterium tuberculosis bacterial cells will actually multiply. The mechanisms by which each pathogen evades digestion by lysosomal enzymes differs from pathogen to pathogen. So, case-to-case basis. Okay? Disorders or conditions that adversely affect phagocytic and inflammatory process. Yes, there are some people who may be suffering from leukopenia, meaning they have abnormally low number of WBCs. Okay? They also, some people would also have the lazy leukocyte syndrome. You won't believe it. When you have lazy leukocyte syndromes, the WBCs are literally lazy and are not capable of phagocytosis. Disorders and conditions affecting leukocyte motility and chemotaxis. Because of this, leukocytes will not be able to migrate in response to chemotactic agents, because particularly a defect of actin. Actin is a structural protein and it is associated with motility. Okay? And then some of them may have the CGD or chronic granulomatous disease, which means that even if they're able to engulf the bacterial pathogens, but they are not capable of degranulating or dissolving it. Okay? So additional factors includes the nutritional status, increased iron levels, because some bacteria may be able to utilize iron inside your body. That's why transferrin is very important. Stressed, cancer and cancer chemotherapy. Why? Because chemotherapy will destroy all cells of your body, okay, including the cells of your immune system. Various genetic defects. There are some patients who may, ano ba examples ng various genetic effects? SCID, severe combined immunodeficiency disorder. Some person or some patients may have DiGeorge syndrome. Okay, so these are just examples of genetic defects. Age, okay, extreme age, neonates and geriatric patients. AIDS, because that will make you immunodeficient, and some drugs such as steroids. Okay. Oh, that's the end of our discussion. I hope you learned something today. Again, Lakas Maka Vlogger, please do not forget to like and share this video and click the bell button below so that you'll be notified whenever new videos are being uploaded. God bless everyone.